Hey everybody, I'm Robert Donovan. Welcome back to Tradecraft Solutions. In this episode, we are going to finally do that animation. Sorry this thing is so late. I know that sucks. Couldn't be helped. So the animation you're looking at here is the result of all the trials and tribulations I went through to produce it. It's still not quite right. There's still some problems with it. I am actually working on a new version of it. It's going to look the same. It's just going to get rid of all the idiot cuts and the clipping and some of the other places that are screwed up on this that you can see as you're watching it. But it's good enough for tutorial purposes. And so here we have a new scene in Blender, and I have deleted the default cube, I've deleted the default lamp, and I'm starting a new scene because I want to show you how to pull objects in from another Blender file. So we're going to use the file that I have been working on the last few videos, and I'm just going to pull objects from that file into this one and then do the animation. So with the cube and lamp deleted, I'm going to right-click on the camera. I'm going to go ahead and turn the screencast keys on for you all. And we'll make this text so it's easier to see. Okay, so first thing we want to do is get this camera in dead center of the 3D scene. To do that, we got to do Alt-G to cancel any movement, Alt-R to cancel any rotation. And we want to now go into top orthographic view, and we're going to use the numpad keys for that. You can also if you don't have a numpad key on your keyboard, go to File, User Preferences, click on the Input tab, and make sure you have Emulate Numpad selected, and that way the numbers across the top of your keyboard will act like the number pad keys, which Blender considers functionally different normally, unless you have this thing checked. All right, with that out of the way, let's go numpad 5, numpad 7, and that will take care of that portion of it. Next thing I want to do is go to the scene settings. I like to use meters for my units. You don't have to do that, but I prefer it. I'm going to go over the camera, and under clipping, we want to set the end point for the clipping to 3,000 Blender units, or 3 km. So that's 3 km, like that. It's a big scene. And that will take care of that. And then lastly, we want this to be a 20-second animation at 30 frames per second. So I'm going to select 30 frames per second in the render tab right here. That's the camera button right there. And I'm also going to set the end frame here to 600. And with my mouse pointer in the window, I'm going to hit the home key, in the timeline window that is. I'm going to hit the home key. That zooms the start and end frames to fit the window. Alrighty, that takes care of all the interface stuff. Next thing we need to do, we're going to use what this animation is, what that animation that you just saw is basically a camera flyby. And the camera is sort of twisting and turning as it goes, which is what gives the impression of the ship maneuvering a little bit at first, and then it kind of gets revealed that it's the camera doing all the stuff. How do we do that? Well, I use the follow path constraint, which we're going to add to this camera. So first thing we need then is a path. So Shift A, curve, and path. All right. If you zoom in a little bit, or I will zoom in a little bit, and you hit Tab to go into edit mode, you'll see these arrows. They show the direction of travel, that if I constrain an object to follow this path, that's the direction that object will travel. Okay, so now that we have that figured out, let's go ahead and go back to object mode, and we're going to rotate this thing in the Z-axis by 90 degrees. Oops, I went the wrong way. Okay, I've got this thing going the other way. We could just spin it 180 degrees, but you could also hit the W key and click Switch Direction, which is what I'm going to do there, as you just saw. So now we've got this thing pointing the right direction. The other thing we want to do is scale it up some. And, one thing you'll notice here in the X dimensions where it says it's 4 meters in the X-axis, and now it's going 4 meters in the Y-axis because we rotated it. To fix that, we want this to say 4 meters in the Y-axis. So do Control-A and apply the rotation. So that goes to 0, and that is now 4. With that, click on the Y dimension, make it 200. As I said, this is a big ship and a big scene. And we're zooming out. There we go. All right, so that takes care of the scale. We also want to apply the scale, so do Control A and click Scale. And now everything is all set the way we want it prior to constraining the camera to the path. That will be our next step. To constrain the camera to the path, we first have to select the camera. I'm going to pull the outliner down a little bit here so we get a little more maneuvering room. And then the two chain links are the Constraint tab on the Properties panel. Click that. Click Add Object Constraint and click Follow. Whoops, wait a minute. We want to have the camera selected, sorry. Click with the camera selected now, click Add Object Constraint, Follow Path, and it doesn't do anything because we haven't told it which path to follow. That is selected under the Target heading here, so click that and then click NURBS Path. You'll see the camera has jumped to the beginning of the path. And I also want to follow the curve on this, so I'm going to pan and zoom here. Go to numpad 3, and this is the way the camera is pointing. I don't want it actually pointing that way. What we're going to do, I'm going to click Follow Curve. That spins it that way, and then I want to have X as up, and that takes the camera in that direction, which is how I want it. And it's a little bit weird, but that's how I want it. Last thing, click Animate Path. So we have the path animated. If we press play, let's zoom out a little bit here so we can see the full action. There we go. If we press play, you'll notice this thing is zipping along pretty fast here. At about frame 100, it just stops. It gets there in 100 frames instead of 600 frames. Let's go back to frame 1 here. And the reason it's doing that is that under the NURBS path, if we go to the curve properties, which is a little curvy button here, curvy button, sorry, the button with the curve on it, the curve icon on it, you'll see under path animation, if you scroll down, make sure that's checked, by the way. If your path isn't animating, that's one reason it might not be. But click frames and make it 600 because we want it to take the the entire, 20 seconds to traverse this path. Now, with that done, we will go back and select the camera, click play, and now it's going much slower. And it's going to take the whole 20 seconds to traverse the path, which is what we want. We know it's working, so I'm going to just stop that, go back to frame 1, and move on. All right, let's go to numpad 7 to go into top view, zoom this out a little bit. And we want to bring in the ship now. So to do that, we are going to click File and click Append. And then from there, you navigate to wherever you have the blend file which contains the objects you want. I happen to know that it's in this folder right here, and it is this file. And you click on that file, and you'll see that you have a bunch of folders here. The one we want is the object folder, and I made 3 copies of this ship. For this tutorial, I'm only going to show you how to do this with one ship. The other 2 ships are animated exactly the same way. And you can, through the copy function, you can create a whole fleet of ships in minutes, but it's going to take a long time to animate them and render all that. But anyway, the Altor's armed is the object I want here in this instance, and I want to append that from the library, and there is our ship. Now, go over here to the outliner, select the ship, and I actually did this animation. This is from the animation that you just saw, so it has all the animation information on it, which I do not want. So to get rid of that, and you will not have to do this, but I'm going to do that because I've already animated this one, and I'm going to clear the keyframes. And you'll see down here there's a keyframe at 600, and there's a keyframe at 1, which you can't see because the playhead's on top of it, but you right-click. Sorry, throat key. Sorry, throat just does not want to cooperate here today. All right, clear keyframes. That gets rid of those. Now we want to align this ship with the path the way that I want it. So hit Shift-S and go Selection to Cursor. Rotate Z 180 degrees. And then grab X minus 20. Like so. That moves the ship where we need it on the side of the path, so the camera is going to come down on that, going to take it down the right side, and you'll see it from that side. And then the other thing we want to do is I want to move the ship a little bit closer into the camera. So let's zoom this in a little bit here. Actually, I want to move it a lot closer to the camera. And let's go ahead and grab this thing in the y-axis. So go G, Y, and I'm going to move this thing about there. And to see what the camera sees, I'm going to create a new window over here. Just grab the chevrons, these little, see, show this in a second, these little diagonal chevrons. You'll see how your cursor changes to the little crosshair. That's how you know you're in the right place. Just left click and drag it to the side, and then I'm going to do T, N, and numpad 0. There we go. And now you'll see the ship is right in up here. That looks like it's about where I want it. Yeah, about 15 meters from the camera. Okay, so that's the first sort of starting position for the ship and the camera. And if we hit play right now, what you'll see is this. Okay, so the ship looks like it's traveling straight down. And the idea with this was, as I said, I was inspired by the short film Prelude to Axanar. They have a shot where one of the Federation ships does this, and then you realize it's a sort of a camera move they're doing, and I wanted to see if I could mimic that camera movement. But anyway, go back to frame 1, and we'll get on with that exercise. So the first thing I want to do is animate the ship. We're on frame 1, and so I want to animate or keyframe the location of the ship on frame 1. So just hold your mouse cursor anywhere over the location information and hit I, and that creates a keyframe on frame 1, and then go over here to frame 600, not 601, 600, and on frame 600 I want to move this ship forward about 65 meters. All right, it's not going to. It doesn't have to be moving fast, but you want the ship moving a little bit because it really does look better if the ship is at least moving some. So what we're going to do is left-click on the Y parameter here, the Y location parameter. I'm going to get rid of that whole thing there. Actually, let's just do a escape here. Let's just left-click on that. Left-click again. Hit the backspace key to get rid of the M, and then I'm just going to go plus 65. Now, yes, I could have just done the math and added that up, but I wanted to show you could do this with Blender. So if you do plus 65 and then hit the Enter key, it does the math for you, and then hit I to keyframe that. Now if we go back to frame 1 and then press play, you'll see that the ship is now moving a little. It looks like the whole thing's moving a little bit faster, but it's actually because both of them are moving. Okay. All right. Now, one thing I do notice is that the ship starts moving. It's starting slowly, and then see how it starts off slow and then speeds up and then slows back down as it gets to the end. I would prefer that it be running at a constant speed from the moment it starts moving. So I'm going to hit stop. I'm going to click. I'm going to go back to frame 1 here. Over in this smaller window, click on the window type selector here, select dope sheet, go over here to key, select interpolation mode, and then over here click linear. Alrighty. Now, as we go through this, you will see that the ship is now moving at a constant speed the whole time. Not a very fast speed, but that's okay. I don't mind. And we'll go back to 3D view here so you can see what we're doing. There we are. Okay, swell. All right, let's go back to frame 1. All right, now to start worrying and working with the camera and the path. And I constrain this to the path so I don't have to keep constantly keyframing the location of the camera. That's handled by the path. All I need to worry about is the rotation of the camera. So select your camera, and let's do a little panning and zooming here. And what I want to do is go to numpad 3, like that, and we'll move over a little bit here, and we want to go to about frame 90, like so, and I want to have the camera stay in that position up to that point, so I'm going to hold my mouse pointer over the rotation data and hit I, and that will keyframe that. And then I want to go to frame 300 and place how I want the camera to wind up. All right, so I'm going to about 300. You can do it a little later if you wanted to, but so here we are. we're going to go ahead and actually, before I do that, let's go back to frame 1 for just a moment. Let's go here. Let's grab this NURBS path. All right. And I want to take this up on the z-axis about 4 meters. Like that. In fact, let's go 4.5. There. Okay. And that gets us a slightly different view of what's going on there, which is good, kind of. All right. And that's I like that view a little better. We're seeing a little more of the ship, obviously. We're going to be moving the path around a little bit more, so if it looks a little weird yet, hang on, we're not done yet. All right, back to frame 90. Okay, where we have our... I could have sworn I'd keyframed that. Oh, we're on the camera. That's why we need to select the camera. And here we are in frame 90 with the camera keyframed the way I wanted. Okay, good. Sorry about that, folks. Been a long night and I'm running on not much sleep. All right, so here we have the next step. We want to go to frame 300. You could go a little later. I like 300 because I want the camera basically at this point to be pointing straight back along the y, basically pointing in the direction of the y-axis, and I want it level and pointing essentially back along the path. So we are going now to zoom in a little bit here, and we want to switch to the local axes here. And I want to twist this thing or rotate this thing in the local z-axis. So, and if you'll look here, you'll see this is now the z, the y, and the x. Okay, the local axes there. Let's go to numpad 3. All right, now rotate. Hit Z once, hit Z twice, and then rotate here. Whoops, I'm still going on the wrong Z. Okay, Control Z that here. Let's try that again. Rotate Z, Z. There we go. No, that isn't why. Why is that thing not doing this here? Should be rotating in the local Z, and it is not. What is going on here? Okay, let's see what happens if we rotate it in the local Y. Okay, that's the local Y. Okay, and we want to rotate in the... Yeah, we want it to turn this way. There we go. So we will just take this down to -90. I think the reason it wasn't working was because it's taking information from the fact it's constrained to the curve there. But we want to go to -90, like that, and then go to numpad 7, and we want to rotate this thing this way. I'm going to go to -90, like that, and then keyframe that. All right, let's go to numpad 1. And let's see how that looks. Okay, it's doing what we want. And again, it's a little far away from the ship yet. So now we need to start messing with the path because it won't. We can do some tweaking once we get it where we want flying over the ship. So let's hit numpad 1. And let's pan and zoom down here, zoom out a little bit so we can get a bird's eye view of what's going on here. And let's select the NURBS path and hit X, or I'm sorry, not X, hit Tab to select everything, then hit A to deselect, hit A to make sure everything is selected, hit A again to make sure everything is selected there, so hit it twice. And I want to hit W, and I want to subdivide this because I want a few more vertices on this path so I can get a little more control over this curve. All right, so now with all of those vertices selected, let's hold the Shift key down, right-click there to get rid of, to deselect these first 3, and then grab the X gizmo here, and we'll move it in like that. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to grab these 3, going to select these 3, And I'm going to move those. I'm going to grab those x minus 1. Just move it a little closer in there. Go to numpad 3. Whoops. Control Z. Hit the enter key there. And then numpad 3. Sorry. Oh, we have just screwed up our path. Hang on here. Let's control Z this. All right. There we go. Yes. Okay, let's try that again here. Numpad 7 and grab x minus 1. Just like that. Okay. And then let's also hit A to deselect everything. Let's just grab this vertex right there. Go to numpad 3. And we're going to go grab Z minus 1, just to drop that down a little bit there. And you'll see on the NURBS path, the curve, actually it's like it's got a subsurface modifier applied to it. It smooths the changes in the various vertices. And I'm going to grab this one here, and we're going to go grab x minus 1. And that way we're just sort of slowly moving in there. And do I have this thing too close on the... Yeah, I kind of got this thing a little close here. So let's hit A to deselect. Do it a couple times, make sure everything's deselected. Hit B to box select. And I'm now going to just grab all those vertices. Grab X1. There. Okay, so... And we got to move this up just a tiny bit on these last few. So let's go shift, right click, and deselect that vertex there. Then go grab Z 1 meter up and hit the enter key. And then shift, right click, and deselect that vertex. Grab Z again 1 meter up. And do that one more time. Shift, right click. Grab Z1, enter. Okay. I think that'll get us more or less where I want to be. We'll start from there and just see what we get. So let's go to numpad 3 and press play and see how that looks over on the other window. Okay. Now we're looking at nothing but sky, and I don't want to completely, yeah, we're still a little low there. I don't want to completely lose sight of the ship as it turns, but let's first get the height on the back end of this thing correct. So let's do a shift, right click, and select these vertices here. Okay, and then go grab Z1. In fact, do that one more time. All right, now let's go back to 1. Play it through. All right, definitely got to deal with that. There we go. Skirting right over the top of that thing now. Okay, cool. There we go. All righty, now... right about there, we're getting totally nothing but sky. And I think, yeah, that's what I thought. See, I think what's happening here, let's go ahead and hit Tab to go back into object mode. And let's also set the origin of that NURBS path to the geometry. So go set origin to geometry. It pays to keep your origins close to their associated vertices. You can this isn't a big deal in this scene, but you can confuse the living daylights out of yourself sometimes if you're not careful about that. So anyway, that takes care of the basic idea. See, the problem is it's pointing up, and I think the reason it's doing that is that it's taking some of its information from the fact that it's constrained to the curve and trying to sort of follow The camera is trying to look in the direction where it thinks we want it to based on the fact we've told it to follow the path. And the trouble is we don't actually want it looking up in the sky. We want it looking at the ship. So let's select the camera. And what I want to do here is I want to rotate. Let's see, how do I want to do this here? Let's rotate. Let's do rotate X, X. And let's rotate this thing this way. Like that. There. And then let's keyframe that. And now let's go back to 1 and see what we can get away with here. There we go. Nice and smooth. Looking good. Okay, and that's basically the animation, folks. You can tweak it all day long and get it to, you can actually play with this in so many different ways. You can actually do something called a track 2 constraint, where you basically have the camera constantly pointing at the ship, which is kind of fun sometimes too. But I wanted to do it this way because that's the shot that was in Prelude to Axanar. So there we go. So let's just observe that one more time. And there we go. And we see the ship. See, it looks like the ship's sort of swooping in, but it's actually not. It's just the camera moving. Okay, so there's that. All right, last couple of things we want to do here. Let's stop this. Go to numpad 7. Zoom out a little bit here. And we're going to select the NURBS path one more time over here in the outliner. I like to use the outliner for stuff like this if I'm way zoomed out because it's just more precise. All right, let's hit the Tab key to go back into edit mode. Right-click to select this vertex, hit E to extrude, and go -2.5. Whoops, don't do it that way. Let's go back to the global axes here. Let's go try this again. Here, go EY. -2.5. There we go. I was assuming I wanted to do it in the x-axis. Okay, my bad. Sorry, your tutorial facilitator is a little out of it today. Okay, the reason I'm doing that is if we continue, one, it's going to speed the camera up just a little bit because it's only got 20 seconds to do the same distance, but it gets us a good distance shot. That ship is now really looking like it's receding off into the distance. There we go. Okay, so that's the animation. So let's go ahead and stop this, and we'll go to about 560. And the reason I'm going to 560 is I want to get a shot here where we can see the ship and the planet and all of this. And the planet, which brings me to, we need to bring the planet in. So back over here to File. Back over to, oops, wait a minute here. We can't do the bring the planet in when we are looking at in edit mode here. So hit Tab to go back to object mode and go to File and Append. And I'm still in that same file. And this time I want to grab the planet. I want to left click on that, hold the shift key down, grab the atmosphere, the clouds, and the empty. All right, which you will recall. And you don't have to use, if you've made some new planets, if you've watched my planet tutorial on how to make your own planet textures, which I'll put a link to in the description below, you can learn how I use GIMP to make all my planet textures. And this one is a new one I did just kind of for this animation. And I always do the texture for the surface, the clouds, and the atmosphere as 3 separate spheres concentrically placed. And then I put an empty on there to control all 3. So I want to grab all 4 of those. I want to click Append from Library. And if we zoom out, we'll find that the planet is way the heck back here. So let's go ahead and select the empty. Left click on that in the outliner. And let's take the Z rotation there to 0. Okay. And now we want to take this thing and let's move it like that. Whoa, we have just done the Romulan phase cloak thing and flown through a planet. Okay, or the not the Romulan phase cloak, but the Enterprise phase cloak, the Federation illegal phase cloak. Sorry, I'm Star Trek geeking out there. Okay, now let's move this thing over this way. So we've got some kind of sort of thing going on there. And move it a little over to the side because we want this thing going to orbit, not slamming into the planet. And let's go to numpad 1 here. And we want to grab it in the global Z. And we'll take the planet down like that. There we go. And let's go ahead. Oh, I need a sun. That would be a good thing, I think. Shift-A, lamp, sun. And now let's look at this badasker. Let's move the sun up a little bit so I can kind of see it in this scene. Let's go ahead and look at this badasker in rendered mode. And whoops, Starfield's missing. Got to get that in there too. So let's go to the world button here, click use nodes, and I'm going to use my Milky Way environment texture. So click on the color here. Click environment texture. Pink. And now we go to the textures and backgrounds, Starfield. Boom. Okay, well, first thing, let's go to the sun, and we will want to... All right, for this one, I'm going to leave the color at white, because though I do sometimes put a yellow tinge for my sun stuff, I have looked this up, and it turns out that in space, the sun is white. The reason it appears yet to have a yellow tint on it is because we are looking at it through the Earth's atmosphere. I do, however, want to make the strength a little higher. Let's take it up to 3.5. There we go. And that gives us a nice bright sun to play with. And the other thing we want to do here, let's go look at this. Let's see. Let's hide the ship for a second here. And let's open up this empty. And let's hide the atmosphere and the clouds. Yes, I do have some landmass there. And let's go to top view here. There we go. Yes, let's go to top view and select the empty. And then rotate Z. Come on, big island, big island. There we go. Okay. There. Now, we have that. Put that a little back farther there like so. There we go. We have that. So let's bring back the clouds. And let's go ahead and select the clouds. And let's rotate those in the Z. Just so we can see a little more of that landmass through the clouds there. There we go. Good enough. And let's go ahead and bring the atmosphere back. And, of course, the ship. There we go. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is you want to give this one frame a render because we've got to do the compositing. Okay, now for this, to show you how I did this, I'm going to switch from this because I unfortunately the place I am doing this I don't have much time, so I'm trying to speed this along. I'm going to hold on, I'm going to leave this file open, and I have another blend file open of the original animation that you just saw running. This is what the compositing is going to look like when we are finished. Okay, and I've rendered this one out. So let's go here to the node editor and go to the scene tab there. There we go. And this is the node tree that I have created to get this compositing effect. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and, okay, there we go. Took it a second to load in. All right, now let's go ahead and we're going, for the moment, I'm going to get rid of the backdrop. It's easier to see these nodes. Now all I have done here is the same basic technique. It's just a couple of add nodes. This first top set of nodes is for the planetary glow. This glow you see around the edge of the planet that enhances the atmospheric glow, and I probably overdid it a little bit now that I'm looking at it here, but we will. And so what I did, the first thing I did, let me go ahead and I will hit Control and cut this off. Actually, not that one. I want the viewer node cut off. We'll put that, whoops. Put that in there. I want to do Control and cut this. Okay, so the first thing I did was I pulled in an ID mask node. Now you'll remember when we did the materials for the ship, right? First off, I gave the atmosphere material a pass index of 1, and then I gave the ship, I gave each of the materials on the ship a different pass index. So the main hull material has a pass index of 0. The landing bay lights have a pass index of 2. The window lights have a pass index of 3. The guns get number 4. You're kind of seeing where I'm going with this. The engine exhaust has a pass index of 5. And the thrust vectoring, the interior, the inner surface of the back of the engine is basically the main hull with the roughness set up because it gives a slightly more defocused, a little rougher look to the exhaust. It was just coming through too well defined with the Fresnel effect there, so I roughened the back surface up to cheat and make it look more like exhaust coming out of there. But so those are the pass index settings. And when you do pass index settings, always make sure that you go on here and you turn on, if you do material indexing, pass indices, turn material index on. If you give an object a pass index, make sure you turn object index on so that the pass index information will be passed to the renderer and you can use that in the compositor. All right, so if this is the first time you've stumbled onto this series of videos, you want to make sure that whenever you assign a pass index, go to the scene settings here and make sure you have the index for whatever you gave an index to. If it's a material, make it a material index. If it's an object, make it an object index, and make sure that is checked, so it's turned on. Okay, so now let's go ahead and I will put this back in here to the viewer so we can see what we've got. Give it a second here. Yeah, this is one of the reasons this takes so long to render, is that this is a long compositing effort. There we go. Okay, so now let's go ahead and I'm going to go and left click on the ID mask. I'm going to do Control Shift left click, and that takes that straight to the viewer. So here you see what has been contributed. This is a path. I have if I go to 0, everything by default is given a pass index of 0. So this is everything except the stuff I want to put. This is all the rest of the scene, basically. All right. Pass index 1 was the atmosphere. So what's going on here is the white will be transparent and the black will be opaque. All right. And then what I did, I took the output, the alpha output of this to the factor on the mix node. This is a color mix node. So just if you're doing Shift A, and this is a color mix node, one of those. That's all this is. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that because we don't need it. All right, and I took the output of this right here. Took this output to the factor there. Okay, and then I took the output of the image to the bottom input on the mix node, like that. Right? And then the top input, I just set to black. When we go to the mix node, you'll see what comes out of that. Go Shift A or Shift Control and then left click, and you'll see that's what's coming out of the mix node, is that by taking this to black, you are allowing the color of the atmosphere along that edge, and only along that edge, to come through. Now, because that's a little dim, I did a Shift A. What did I get there? Converter. What did I do? Color. Yeah, color gamma node. Did a gamma node there, And I set that down to about 0.3 to brighten this up a little bit. So it's going to show up now, do Shift Control, and okay, so it brightens it up. There's still some blue tint to it from the atmosphere, but it's brighter. And the reason I brightened it up was that I was going to took the output of that and put it into a glare node. And I have the fog glow set. And I have it set to the threshold of 0.2, the mix at 0, and the size at 8. And what that gets us, you may not be able to see it on YouTube, but there's a glow. And I'm actually going to knock that threshold up a little bit because it does seem a little bright to me. You will probably have an even harder time seeing it now on YouTube, but there we go. Okay, and so now we took the output of the glare node into a blur node, and I just set that at 30 and 30 for X and Y. And that gets us the... And to change the output to the viewer, I'm just doing Shift Control and then left-clicking the node. Okay, so that is what we get with our blur node added. And then what I want to do is I want to take the original image and put that on top of this. So I did a Shift-A, and I did a... Oh, I did a mix node. And I set the mix to add. Okay, that's what I did there. Okay, so, sorry, couldn't remember how I did that. Okay, so now what we did, in Blender, the bottom input is layered on top, and the top input is layered on the bottom. So I took the output of all of this Garabatsio here, and I sent it to the bottom input of the add node, and then I took the original image right here, and I sent it to the top or bottom input, the top layer, which is the bottom input. Isn't that nice and confusing? We'll do it again. The top layer in the bottom input of the add node. Yeah, there's a reason sometimes Blender tutorials can drive you a little nuts. And then from what that gets us, if we do Control-Shift-Left-Click, that gets us our planetary glow. All right. What it does not do, however, is give us that really awesome exhaust glow from the engine exhaust. For that, we need to do this again using a different pass index. So I duplicated the ID mask node and the mix node and took them down here, took the index MA down to the ID value of the second node, just I took the index MA down to the ID value here, and I took that, and the output of that went to the factor, did the same thing with the mix node, only this time I set the pass index instead of, let's go ahead and show you what I've got here, Shift, Control, left click. I set the pass index instead of at 1. I set it, this is the lights, that's the, there we go, and that's the engine exhaust right there. And so then I did from the output of this mix node here, which is the same setup we had for the atmosphere. These are exactly this. The only difference is the index, the pass index here. I did not use a gamma node for that. I just took the output straight to a blur node, which gives us, and that was 10 and 10, X and Y, fast Gaussian on the first blur node as well. Okay, so that gives us that. I then took the output of that into a gamma node and dropped it to about 0.8, which gives us that. Glows, it brightens it up just a little bit. And then I threw that into a glare node, streaks, high res, 4 iterations, and basically just played with these until I got something I liked. 8 streaks, threshold 0, mix 0. Okay, if you can't see that on YouTube. And we'll go Shift, Control, left click. And we're waiting. And we're waiting some more. And we're still waiting. There we go. And that gives us our super duper wampum smack'em exhaust blasting out of there look. And now, yeah, those super wampum is a technical term. Hope I didn't just bury you with technical jargon there. It's not really a technical term. Okay, we're going to take the output of this first add node because we want the image with the planet glow beneath the glow for the engine exhaust. So we're going to take that and put it to the top input of another add node. I just duplicated this node. And then we're going to take the output of the glare node to the top the top layer, the bottom input of this second add node here. Control-Shift left click. And you have seen this before. Okay, so that gives us our really whacked out engine exhaust there, and again you can tweak that a little bit if you want to. But that's our engine exhaust, and that's the compositing we're going to use for all 600 frames. All right, so now to actually do the animation, let me minimize this. So once you've done all your compositing, you go over here to the render button here, and you make sure your start frame is 1, your end frame is 100, and your frames are 30. You can do different numbers for this if you want to, but that's what I used. And then you click Animation, and Blender will then proceed to systematically render every frame from 1 to 600. And in the output section here, I did not use the temp folder. I used let's see if I can make my way there. I put everything into this folder here called Animation Stills. All right. And I just clicked that I just created that folder and put the path in there up here, this right there, and then I went Accept. And now that will show up down here, and that is where your still images will go to. And I do recommend doing your renders for an animation as a series of stills. I went to PNGs. You have numerous other formats that you can use for this if you want to really be, do OpenEXR or OpenEXR multilayer if you've got a ridiculously large amount of hard drive space, because those are huge files. I just went with PNGs. They're good enough. They're not too big, and they get the job done. I went with very little compression, 15%. The color depth, we don't really need an RGBA on this thing, but I left it in there. You could do the 16-bit color depth if you wanted to. I haven't noticed it made a lot of difference. But if you feel like it, go right ahead. And then that will then render file names of 0001 to 0600, and that will have your series of still frames. Okay, so that will create your series of still frames. The reason you want to do that is a couple. One, if you have to stop in the middle, as I frequently did, because I could not use my computer all the time and leave it running to just render, so I had to stop and pick up where I left off. If you render to a series of stills, if you get to still 400 and you've got to stop, you have to stop on 401, you just stop the render on 401. Stills 1 through 400 are saved, and when you have time, you start up again and you just set the start frame to 401, it'll start on 401, and you just go as long as you can until you're done. Okay, so that is the one reason. And if you want the other, and I didn't do this on this one, but let's say you have a few frames that just don't look, you want to enhance them, you want to do some things on, maybe there's 10 frames in your whole animation you don't really like, you want to touch them up a little bit, you can go back, just touch up those 10 still frames, and then go in and take all those frames into this video sequence editor and make it render that into an MP4. If you start out doing the render and rendering directly to a movie file, if you have to stop in the middle, you have to start all over from the beginning, and I would never have gotten it done because I couldn't leave the computer running long enough to do those renders. So that's why I recommend doing a render to stills. Right? Now, once you have your stills rendered, and I'm going to open up the original file here again. Okay, so let's go here, and I'm actually going to close this instance of Blender here. And I'm going to open up a new Blender instance here. Going to just go to the video sequence editor. Alrighty, and if you click on the bars and checkers here, you can get a video window and a sequence window. And then what you do is you go add image. And here you'll see it says add an image or image sequence to the sequencer. So we're going to add the image. And I'm going to go back to my animation stills and then just hit A to select all of these and then add the image strip to the video sequence editor, and we can zoom out here. You'll see this is 600 frames. We want to take our window again to the end frame being 600 because that's the length of our video. Hit home to zoom that in so we see where we are. And if we go to 1 like that, and you can prefetch the frames and you can just, this is really slow because I'm doing the screencast, but all right, but you know, you'll see what happens if we switch this. And okay, so you've got these rendered stills here like that, like so. Okay, and so go back to frame 1. All right, and now instead of rendering to PNG, I rendered to H.264. My encoding, I used MP4. You could use AVI. And one thing I have found helps tremendously is if you change the bit rate to about 18,000. All right. In fact, if you look, the way I got that number was I looked at the video camera that I normally use for shooting the ones where I'm in front of the camera, and I noticed the bit rate on that camera is about 18,000. So I set that to 18,000 so you don't get this blocky, chunky look to your videos when the images are rendered. And so I set this to about 18,000 myself, like that, and I left everything else the same. If you have an audio codec and you want to add some sound, you can pull in a sound file and just add it to this thing. Just go add sound and pull in a sound file. I do not have one, so I'm not going to do that. But that is where you would set the, if you have an audio codec and you want to render the audio codec, you can choose from these audio codecs here. I'm going to leave it at none because there's no sound yet on this. And add some, well, I don't actually need motion blur because I put motion blur when I did the render. So let me go back here and backtrack a little bit here. When you do this render, when you're rendering the stills, make sure you turn on motion blur. All right, and when you open up the motion blur, I set this at 0.35. I don't do 0.5 because that just makes everything too blurry. So 0.35, 0.3 works fine for me. You can also do a shutter curve and kind of, you know, get it really tweaked that way. I'm not that familiar with this, so I just stuck with a straight number. This is actually a new thing in Blender 2.7. This wasn't in earlier versions of Blender, I don't think. So there we have what I did for the settings there. Just to go back over that, you have your 30 frames per second. You're rendering at, I'm rendering at 256 samples. PNGs. Don't need an RGBA, but you can leave it in there if you want to. It won't hurt anything. Set your compression low so your files are not too huge, but they render faster. Everything else I just use for the defaults. Turn on motion blur, and when you're done, click animation, and that will start. Make sure your start frames at 1, your end frames at 600, and then click animation. That'll render your stills. Once your stills are rendered, open up the video sequence editor. Click Add, click Image, navigate to where your stills were rendered to, hit A to select all of them, and then add the image strip to the sequencer. It'll look like this, and now we can, can I zoom that in there like so? Yes, I can. If you put your mouse cursor in the window here and hit home, it'll zoom your start and end frames in for you. So there is that. And then once you have your video file and bitrate and all of that stuff selected, hit animation again, and you will see that it does a very, very good, it's pretty quick because now it's just rendering 2D frames, and that will be, that'll render you your animation, and that's how you do that. So that is how we got the animation, the compositing, all of that done. I hope you have all found this interesting, if not necessarily instructive. I'd love to hear your comments and see what you guys do with this. I'm sure that there's a lot of people who are just better graphics artists than I am. But anyway, that's how I did the animation. That's how I did that little 20-second film. And I actually have some newer chapters where this one, they kind of show up at the planet, and I'm working on some audio where you're going to hear orders where they get told to warp out for a special operation they're all heading out on. So I'm going to do the warp out sequence, and they warp out, and I might even do a space battle in there somewhere. Might do some asteroids. Asteroids are a pain in the neck on my machine, but I'll see what I can do. And we're going to might do a space battle in there as they run into someone trying to stop them from getting on their mission. And then I'm going to do another one where they warp out from the space battle and they head to Earth, and then they do I'm going to do a landing sequence on that one where they go down through the atmosphere, and I'm going to actually use the camera tracking features on Blender to show one of the fighters leaving the ship, going in a landing sequence, and landing in a parking lot where I work. Thanks so much for watching. May the balance of your day be awesome.